Hello, everybody, my fellow conservatarians, liberals within my fan base, and centrists, and caps, and even a few socialists for that matter. This is the Dark Conservatarian, and I am I'm hosting another interview version of Strike Force. This time with a guy who I have had barely any interactions with until now. Say hello to Secular Hawk.
Is this where I say hello as well?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, hello.
That's kind of the implication. But anyway, hello, Cody Ray. How are you doing? But yes, anyway, so Secular Hawk, you want to introduce yourself at all? I know that you don't have you're not much of a content creator anymore ever since you deleted your original YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, I not at all anymore. Um,
You
I
just
have a Twitter. It's at bisexual hawk, and I I just make tweets about politics.
Yep, I have that link down in the description box below if anybody wants to see him. And so, yeah, you're just pretty much an edgy memer at this point, mostly, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay, so first things first, I gotta clarify one thing. I do not know if you are trolling or not because I have seen you like change your names to a particular ideology so often within the recent couple of months. But in all seriousness, though, are you now a socialist or are you still a social democrat?
I'd say I lean pretty heavily towards, or I lean quite a bit towards socialism now. Although, when I originally uh, asked for this, I think I was still leaning a little bit more towards the social democracy.
Okay.
Uh,
Wait,
so
wait.
initially, this was just, I don't know,
Uh,
more trying to argue a contrarian position.
okay. So, uh, so you're still trying to find your political compass, is what you're saying. Do I have that right?
Yeah, very much so.
Of whether you ascribe to social democracy or full on socialism.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we got that out of the way, I guess this is like one of the bigger things that I want to get out of the way. And you, of course, I know that you aren't too fond of talking about this subject right here, like you have mentioned it a few times in the over Twitter and whatnot. But about my positions on okay, about abortion in general. What are your thoughts on that and whatnot?
I think it should generally be legal at least up until like 24 weeks ish. Uh,
Okay.
but anything like, I think 20 points should be, or 20 points, 20 weeks should be the cutoff at minimum.
Right. But for some reason, I like when in my interactions with other people that I know over the internet, they when they were interacting with you, for some reason, I was getting the implication that you were like full on defending late term abortions. But I guess you were just being a contrarian, like you say you like to be.
Yeah, for the most part. I don't
Yeah,
think like, I think there are situations in which late term abortions could be morally justified.
like
Um,
Life of Mother.
yeah, the life of the mother, the life of the, yeah, the fetus in terms of like viability. But in general, I think after 24 weeks, it should generally be prohibited.
Right. That's my general position as well. I mean, as far as Life of
Oh, I thought
Mother
you were full on anti abortion.
life of you thought that I was against the Life of Mother exception?
Oh, no, I understood the exception, but figured
Oh
I
no no
thought
no.
that.
When I'm saying that when it comes to Life of Mother, that's the exception that I believe in, and maybe even in the very 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 rare circumstance of needing a mother life saving uh procedure of a late term abortion on a late term fetus to be able to save her life. Uh, I don't know. It's still a sadder situation than anything earlier than 20 weeks. If you or anything earlier than, let's say, 25 weeks, you have to like abort that far along of a conceived fetus to save your own life. You know, you get my point.
Yeah, I think generally in terms of abortion, the earlier it is, the more easy it is to defend.
Yeah, that's where that most people I find the most thought provoking and most challenging when it comes to abortion is the people who actually defend the earlier terms abortion. When it comes to like late term abortion, the only defense that they really have is the rather arbitrary situation of their physical position. That being that they're just inside the womb. They can survive. They very well plausibly can survive outside of the womb, maybe with some medical assistance, but still. And yet you are saying that they have absolutely no right to life just because of what? Because of this physical position that is not of their fault that they're in? Yeah. It doesn't jive well with me.
Like 20 weeks, definitely. 20 to 24 is like, I'm not exactly qualified to say whether 20 or 24 is better, but it seems like pre at least 20 weeks, like they can't really usually survive outside of the womb. So.
All right. I mean, there have been stories. I mean, let me see if I can like find some. There have even been stories of like early births going back to even 21 weeks. Early birth at 21 weeks. So I would think, okay. Okay, what is the youngest baby to survive? Freda Mangold was born more than 4 months early at 21 weeks and 5 days. She weighed a smidge over a pound. Doctors in the U.S. often advise that premature babies born before 23 weeks be given only comfort care. Swaddled, they're handed to their parents to hold free of medical interventions. Yeah. So I think a person could very well make the case that definitely 21 weeks perhaps would probably be I mean, there's plausible viability. I mean, they aren't definitely outright going to survive. Like there's I don't know.
Yeah, it's like that's more of an edge case rather than the rule.
Right.
Usually a child born before 24 weeks-ish is pretty much not going to live, but
well, maybe like maybe if you like keep them so long, maybe after being born for so long, and they cannot make it to the point where they are no longer reliable on the said assistance. Yeah, I don't know. But do you know? I don't know. What all do you know about my abortion positions, for example?
from what I understand, you're against abortion except for life of the mother, that kind of exception.
I make an exception for very, very early as well, like 7 weeks and before. That's I mean, yes, in the literality of all things, life does begin at conception, but I don't believe that that's when that human individuality begins, and thus when their right to life begins, is my thought. Like, this is kind of the thing that was most frustrating with my debate against Owen, for example, is that he just kept on saying that they're not alive and they're not human, even though that's kind of a big time denial of biology. Like, I think what he was meaning to say was that in his opinion, human individuality doesn't, or they're not an individual worthy of moral protections or whatever. But he wasn't able to clarify on that, and so he just ended up sounding like a bit of a dumbass, in my opinion. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you probably know some of the distaste that both me and Owen have for each other, to say the least. Maybe even outright hatred.
Yeah, I know you two are not the biggest fans of each other at all.
Not
I
in the
follow
least
his
bit.
feed, so
Um, which I don't know. But before I go on the subject of talking more about Owen, so you think that it is a big time oxymoron for somebody to be like, say, uh, claim themselves to be a libertarian, but also claim to be pro-life?
Uh, I I really like. I think that that is definitely not a libertarian position, but I do know that most people don't hold to their ideological position for everything. That was more to get a rise out of you on Twitter, but
Okay. Well, yeah. Typically, I do not engage in a whole lot of Twitter and other text debates. I mean, yeah. I mean, I like to resolve these conversations in actual voice. So, uh, because that's a easier way of communicating. You can like better communicate to people's emotions and so on and so forth. Know actually of how that they're reacting. I mean, I know that I have assumed like an angry aggression from people that even I consider friends, like be it if I'm debating them over Facebook or even people over Twitter. I assume that they're angry, but then it just is a wrong assumption that I'm making, and then just tensions just boil over and boil over. They just build and build, and well, boil over to the point that you're all like, "Oh, I don't want to talk to you again. Fuck off."
Twitter is not like a productive forum for conversation almost ever.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to have you on a live stream for the longest time. But anyway, as far as like consistency on positions go, I will grant that it is not the most conventionally uh consistent position for me to claim to be pro-life, despite me myself proclaiming to be a libertarian as well. I think that if a person was one to be the absolute most consistent, that they would be, well, an anarchist. I'm just gonna leave it at that. uh, I'm not going to put any word after anarchist, anarcho-communist, anarcho-capitalist, stuff like that. I mean, I think that's the only most consistent position that a person can really have. I mean, especially if they say that they stand for liberty, for example. Like if you really stand for liberty, you'll stand for no government taxing you and so on and so forth. That's
Yeah,
I mean, especially coming from my own stance. Even if like say in we get to Ancapistan, and this would be a conversation that I have to get more in with my ANCAP friends, is that I do not see how in Ancapistan you would be able to protect all these unborn fetuses, because ANCAPs are like kind of half and half. I'm just gonna put out an arbitrary percentage right there, half and half when it comes to abortion. Some of them believe that it is a, a violation of the NAP if you are to like terminate a fetus's life, and some of
yeah,
them believe that it is actually not a violation of the NAP to be doing that, but in fact it's actually a violation of the NAP if you're going to be telling the woman, no, you cannot terminate the life inside of you. And so that's, yeah, it's just a rather gray area. But um so but in my opinion, I don't see of how that you can like really make the consistent argument to say, oh yeah, you have a life inside you, so we are going to violate what you view to be the NAP applicable in order to protect their life. I mean, if that
yeah.
makes any sense.
I think I see what you're saying.
But yeah, Heartless Soy Boy in the chat says there is no libertarian stance on abortion because, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, when it comes to libertarianism, they say it is inconsistent for you to be against abortion and also proclaim to be a libertarian. But then there are some other libertarians that say it's neither here nor there. You can be either pro-choice or pro-life and not be any less of a libertarian. But yeah.
Well, it is fundamentally a question of liberty, and
I
that
mean, yeah.
in this case, you're more for having a decent amount of restriction on that, which I don't think everyone is fully bound to like their ideological principles on every single issue. In
Yeah.
terms of like always being more pro liberty, like on most issues, I am for like individual freedoms and all that, but I'm a lot bigger on gun control, and I don't think that's like ridiculous
Hmm.
to have these positions that are, not necessarily as libertarian, even though I'm more towards the libertarian end of the authoritarian libertarian spectrum there.
I might have some questions on that regarding libertarian versus authoritarian and what your stances are on that, but I'll get to them on later. Um, let's see. There was something else I was wanting to ask. Uh, oh, now I remember what it was. I mean, if you want to go off on a limb, somebody could even by extension say that even with conservatism, you cannot be fully consistent on that. Like, for example, or I guess you can be consistent, but not everybody is going to be 110% consistent with conservatism. Like, for example, the status quo within your own society that you're living in could be fully against marijuana smoking and so on and so forth. But you could, like, just deviate from conservatism in this one area, whilst overall you are for conservatism in other areas.
Yeah, the only way to be like 100% pro conservatism is to be like, the country is perfect now and it should never change. Uh,
Yeah, but
that's not
that's
a position that I think anybody in America has. So.
yeah, not of course not, because it actually, you know what, that's a good point, because if somebody wanted to like preserve America for exactly how it is right now, they would preserve Obamacare for how it is and preserve, government subsidies of all these businesses and bailouts and whatnot. But grassroots conservative Republicans, they're generally speaking against bailouts and subsidies from what I have noticed, anyways. And they're against the establishment GOP, like particularly the likes of Mitch McConnell and so on and so forth. Lisa Murkowski, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, um, but as I have always said in regards to conservatism, conservative is relative. It's relative to the time and place that you live in. Um, like for example, if I was to like live in Sweden, I cannot really, in reality, call myself a conservative living there because, in all honesty, I don't. I don't. Well, okay, maybe that's not quite the example that I would put forth. Although I am generally against single-payer healthcare system, so I cannot call myself really a conservative in that area. But say, for example, like the UK, they have an even more extreme version of single payer healthcare than Sweden or Norway, as from what I recall, anyways. Plus, they have stricter. They're one of the more strict gun control countries on the continent, if I recall correctly, anyways. And those are, of course, things that I am not for. So I cannot call myself a conservative in the UK. But
yeah,
I would just be a
it's
straight
all
up
relative.
libertarian. Sorry, what?
It's all relative.
Yeah, if you and I were both to live in the UK, you'd probably be more of the conservative than me. But that's not our circumstance. We live in America, and so I'm the more conservative one, arguably. Although conservative is more of an adjective of my positions. It's not the prime ideology that I ascribe to. I mean, that's a kind of one of the things that I almost think that Owen kind of forgets at times. Um, But yeah, about Owen actually. What are your thoughts on him, honestly?
I don't know. I follow his Twitter feed, and I think it's pretty funny. I think that I don't know. I think I agree with a decent amount of his takes on uh, opposition to capitalism, but
Hmm. Do you think that he brings up politics and economics in a in a given tweet a little bit too much out of left field and too often?
I don't know about like brings up politics and economics too much. I guess that's what his account is about. But in terms of like pretty much every tweet is socialism, I guess that's true. But if
Mhm.
that's how he wants to run his account, that's how he wants to do it. So
Yeah, I mean, nobody's trying to dictate on how he should or should not do his account, just in the same way that nobody is really technically dictating on how Stefan Molyneux should run his Twitter account. But to bring up a more concise example, I have heard people like criticize Owen, like he'll be in a tweet, for example, in a given tweet, he'll be talking about mental illness and the flaws with it, and then he'll, like, out of left field, connect it to capitalism in some cockamamie way. That's what I'm more specifically talking about. And no, not just by right wingers am I hearing this criticism, by the way.
yeah, it's almost pretty much all of his tweets are in some way related back to opposition to capitalism, which, I mean, depending on your personality, can be rather grating. But
Yeah. I mean, in that given example right there, do you think that's a little bit out of left field?
I don't know. I'd have to see the individual tweet. So
Yeah, I don't know it honestly myself. I mean, the person that I heard that example from, they weren't showing a screen cap. They were just saying that, and I was like given the benefit of the doubt that it is true because it would honestly not surprise me because it's Owen. um, I mean, I guess knowing that and all the other times that he would like almost consistently bring up capitalism, I kind of contrast it with Stefan Molyneux and how often he'll bring up race, for
yep,
example.
everything is race to Stefan Molyneux.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And people go telling to me of how he wasn't this much obsessed with race in, like, say, the early 2010s or the late 2000s, but ever since the mid and later 2010s, with the rise of the alt right, he's like changed his mantra to be more pandering to them and their white identitarianism and outright racism, even.
Yeah.
Um, what were you about to
I
say? Something?
guess I guess that everyone's got their certain paradigm through which they analyze the world, and Owens happens to be anti-capitalism, and Molyneux, I guess, happens to be race.
Yeah. So I guess on that note, we'll weave away onto talking about economics in general. Like you say that you lean heavily towards socialism, but actually, here's my question: wouldn't you say that social democracy leans pretty heavily towards socialism in of itself?
Not really, because social democracy is still capitalistic in terms of like the workers don't own the means of production in a social democracy.
I mean, no, but the government regulates it, and the people vote on how the government is to regulate it, or at least that's what the system is supposed to be, anyways. How it's
Well, it
supposed to
depends
function.
on the socialist system, because like some of them
All
would
right.
rather have government ownership, which would be indirectly worker ownership if
Yeah.
it's an elected
Okay. So,
government, whereas others would want like the workers to directly own each individual business. That's more like uh,
right.
libertarian socialism, I guess.
I mean, that seems to be the ideal for most of these internet socialists and internet communists is that they want the people to be able to directly own the means of production and so on and so forth. But my
Yeah,
thought
unless you're
on
talking to like a Marxist Leninist, and they're not usually
yeah,
the ones that are in the leftist
although
circles. At least not the ones I run in, because like democratic socialists and
hmm,
just libertarian socialists more generally tend to hate tanky. So
all right. I mean, wasn't Vlad Lenin's original intent though to try to get the means of production owned by the people, but then ended up his plans ended up getting derailed uh, by Stalin, for example.
to some extent, I'd say I don't know. I'm not as
I mean, I kind of always assumed that Vlad Lenin's original intent was not that he was always going to own the means of production through his dictatorial rule or whatever, but he was going to first lead a revolt to take the means of production and then give it to the average citizen.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to tell intent when he's dead now, so.
Right. I mean, I guess one would have to go back and read like dozens of quotes from him and whatnot. Unfortunately, I'm not exactly the strongest reader, but you know that's kind of what Google and Bing is for. Um, so you said a little bit earlier um, that basically in social democracy or democratic socialism, you kind of made the admission that the people would be indirectly owning the means of production through government assistance.
Yeah, like in certain forms, especially more towards the uh, like the more you get towards the authoritarian end of socialism, that's the more where you'll find government control and all that. Whereas in the other direction, you'll find more anarchists and all that. So.
Hmm. Um. What was? Sorry, I keep on losing my train of thought in this interview. I guess did not come all that well prepared. Oh yeah, social democracy. Talking about that a little bit more. Like, what are some of the tenets of social democracy?
Having a larger welfare state is
Uh
more
huh.
social democratic. I'd say redistributive policies in terms of like wealth or land, and I'd say regulation of businesses.
Right. I mean, so my original question was if you would still say. I mean, obviously, there is some sprinklings of capitalism within social democracy. I mean, it's not like the government like has full on ownership, or the people through the government have full on ownership over like every single mom and pop shop and every single big corporation or whatever. But there's still the heavy regulations that I have seen social democrats and just left liberals in general be advocate. Hello? Okay, he left for some reason. Uh, Let me see. I'm kind of losing my train of thought. I lost the hawk. Did you lose connection? Sorry for the. Did your internet drop? No, not mine. Okay. Let me give him the invite again. Wait, no, that's not it right there. If I can, let me try it. I tapped back and it said call ended. Okay, let me try again. I'm going to like possibly give him back the invite again if I have to. Okay. So I gave him the invitation again if he needs it. Okay. All right. So you're back now.
All right, that was weird.
That was very weird, and
I'm pretty sure I didn't press the button to hang up, but
and it was while I was in the middle of talking too. Damn it! I can't. Okay. So I can't even remember my train of thought exactly. Was talking about social democracy, obviously.
you were saying it was more socialist-esque.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get down to the bottom of. Oh yeah. So again, what I was saying is that there is like some sprinklings of capitalism within social democracy, and that people can own for the most part, or at least halfway, their own business. Okay, official ownership is still in the hands of a single person that found the business or that inherited the business, either one. Or but at the same time you still have like heavier regulations on the business that tells how that they should run it. which is where that I would say that the people like not full on owning the means of production, but helping to run the means of production through the government, like say minimum wage laws and what benefits that a business should give their employees, etc.
Social democracy. Oh, am I muted? Can you
No,
hear
you're
me?
not. You're not muted. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm just not seeing the things that usually come up in the corner that indicate I'm talking. Okay, well, if you can hear me, that's
It's
fine then.
popping up on the Your icon is popping up on the browser here, so yeah, I can hear you.
All right.
Anyway, go
Yeah,
on.
there's just normally green lines that indicate when I'm talking, so I'm I just wanted to make sure I wasn't muted. But
All right.
social democracy is definitely more a mixed economy than anything, but it's still
Hmm.
fundamentally capitalistic because there is a capitalist at the top that still owns the means of production. So
I wouldn't really call it. I wouldn't really so much call it fundamentally capitalist because when I think of like something being fundamentally capitalist, I'm thinking like for the absolute most part, or even fully, the individual owns their own business and so forth. Like there is little to no regulations. Like I'm not like an anarcho-capitalist myself. I think that there should be some basic safety regulations to prevent manslaughter type situations from happening, like serving moldy food and so forth. And my ANCAP friends might want to like bicker with me on that one, but that's beside the point. But when it comes to like stuff like minimum wage laws, what benefits are to be provided, and so on and so forth, I am like generally against those. Like the right to deny service as well. I am for business owners being allowed to like discriminate in how they want and deny service in how they want. But
denial of service is more. Uh, it really depends. Like I think there are protected class. I agree with there being protected classes. It depends on like the class though. Uh, like I don't think political view should necessarily be a protected class, or I'm not really sure how I feel about religion as a protected class, but I don't. I definitely think like LGBT people and gender and all that should be protected classes.
okay, so I remember you kind of sparring over Twitter. And okay, so to wrap up with the last thing that I was talking about, I guess it'll be just a kind of an agree to disagree type of situation on whether or not we think that social democracy is inherently capitalist or socialist. If anything, it's the botched love child of both worlds.
Yeah,
um, is what
yeah,
I'll say in the least if I wanted to like compromise on our own conversation here. But weaving from that to talking about the right to deny service. So I recall you sparring with Ham on public Twitter, talking about how you think that internet websites like Twitter and so forth should be allowed if they want to boot Nazis and other people of certain political affiliations off of their platform if they want to, correct? Hawk? Hello? You're muted. Hawk? Secular Hawk? You do
sorry
realize...
about that. I had a my cat was in my room and it was bugging me to let it out. So
Oh, I
um,
see. But did you hear what I was saying there?
yeah, I did listen to everything you said, uh, and I do believe that like political views, particularly like extremist ones, like Nazis' views, are very much something that should be open for a social media platform to censor based on.
What about black nationalism so far to the extent of Ghazi Kadzo?
Yeah, if that's someone's political view, I think that uh, it should be allowed to be censored by a social media platform if that's not the culture they're trying to create.
I mean, the only time that I would think that really an internet company should, because generally speaking, I mean, yes, I am for the private property rights that they boot anyone, absolutely anyone off their platform that they want to. But by principle, I would love it if these internet companies allowed all political affiliations to talk as much as they want about their own beliefs and debate about them as much as they want on their platforms. But the only extent that I would really say that free speech should not be extended is when it comes to death threats, doxing, spreading around child porn. Well, actually, child porn in of itself is illegal already in the first
Well,
place.
yeah, obviously with
Much,
like a crime, they
yeah.
should be allowed to censor based on that.
Uh,
Um,
yeah. So somebody shooting another person and bragging about it. An example like that. Um,
which is why George Zimmerman's Twitter was suspended.
okay. Um, yeah, I mean,
Like the thing
whether
I go back to on this issue is like you think of a platform where there is no like discrimination based on like extremist viewpoints, and you end up with a platform like Gab that nobody wants to be on. So
um, well, I know at least one person that has a Gab account, uh, who is an ANCAP, and as far as I know, he does not agree at all with sorry, Boomer just approached up in the chat. Um, as far as I know, my 2 cents, that's his name. He's an ANCAP. As far as I know, he doesn't believe in any white nationalism or anything like that. I guess he just has a Gab just for the sake of having some form of social media communication outside of YouTube and BitChute and so on and so forth.
yeah,
Like just
I don't think everybody on Gab is like a Nazi or anything, but I think
right.
that uh, that Gab has such a problem with like at least a sizable amount of like extremists that even if they're
Yeah.
perhaps a minority, it kind of ruins the experience for everyone, and that's why nobody really likes having an account there unless they're like banned from Twitter or something.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and read the chat comment. Marxism Taylorism, or cultural boomerist as he's more popularly known, says, Hawk, represent the commies well or die. Yeah, I mean, you
Got a
two,
resident tanky in the chat.
I mean, I, I have my own interview with him like Monday, so I can like ask him questions on whether or not he's an actual tanky or not, because I don't know the full extent of his beliefs, but that'll be.
Ask him if I represented the commies well.
But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So you believe in people being allowed to deny service all they want based on political affiliations? Definitely. Religious affiliations is a big fat maybe or maybe not. But when it comes to
Yeah,
things like sexuality, race, sex, and otherwise, that's where you draw the line and say no.
yeah, and the reason for that is kind of why religion is more like a question mark to me, because like people largely choose their political beliefs, and so I think that's an okay
Right.
thing to discriminate on based on. I don't think it's okay to discriminate based on someone's gender or their LGBT status, because that's just kind of the way people are born. Which is why like religion is a tough one, because I mean in a way people are kind of born into a religion, even if it is like ultimately their choice to follow it in the end. The hardcore indoctrination from birth kind of makes it not a choice, whereas in the end it's everyone's choice which religion they follow. So it's a
Yeah.
tough one.
I mean, when it comes to like religions and trying to interpret them, like particularly the scripture in which the religion is based off of, like for example, Christianity to the Bible or Islam to the Quran, and so on and so forth. Um, that's like a little bit more ambiguous as to what the person actually believes. Whereas if a person claims to be of a certain political ideology, there's not as much ambiguity. Like if somebody says, I'm alt-right, well, then that immediately implicates that that they, well, believe in a white ethno state, for example, believe that IQ is the determining factor for whether or not a race is inherently inferior or not, et cetera, et cetera. But then you look at a Christian, there's a little bit more ambiguity. You'll be, if somebody says that they're Christian, you'll be asking, what's the full extent of their beliefs? Do they believe that, say, rock music is a sin and that you should not be listening to it at all? Or do they think that, hey, it's okay as long as it does not violate, as long as it doesn't violate this extended law in the Bible, or so on and so forth? And
Yeah,
there are
there's a
even
lot
some,
of different viewpoints in like religious groups that is quite a bit more than exists between members of the same political ideology. Like it's insane how like highly predictive someone's stance on like abortion is to their stance on like the estate tax. Like those are two things that should not be correlated at all, but they're for some reason very heavy predictors. So
I
there's not
think
very much diversity of thought between the parties.
I think when it comes to abortion, people don't want to address the ambiguity and the gray areas with people's beliefs as much as they should. But anyway, I was back on religion. I was also want to mention that there are even some Christians that believe that that homosexuality is not really a sin, at least according to the new covenant, anyways. Like there's this one video that I go sharing around in the description box of my videos a lot that he makes a rather convincing case, I would say, as to how it is possible, like not for absolute certain, because nobody knows for absolute certain what's a sin or not, because for all you know, the current Bible that everybody reads could have been mistranslated and really God was saying something else that the Bible is not. But anyway, my point was, this gay Christian that I'm talking about, he makes a rather convincing case for why possibly homosexuality is, in fact, not a sin. But
Well, the
anyway,
other thing uh, with that is like the couple of condemnations of homosexuality in the Bible are in the same parts as like the condemnation of wearing clothes that are a mix of fabric. And I've heard people argue that those are
right.
really just supposed to be kind of rules for the ancient Jewish culture and not like these things are like hard sins or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you go talking about old law versus new law. One prime example that is rather strikingly obvious when it comes to what is no longer valid and required is like stoning people for their sins. Because, as obviously said, there were lots of sins that were people were to be stoned for, like adultery and, yeah, even homosexuality. But then, fast forward a few thousand years later, then you end up, then Jesus says himself, he who is without sin casts the first stone, to say, in other words, that you cannot kill somebody for their sin anymore, because you yourself are not clean of sin yourself.
Yeah, that's I guess the issues that you run into when you worship like an ancient text of like loosely connected
Um,
fairy tales. So.
I just want to clarify, by the way, nobody worships the text. I mean, I think I get the point that you are trying to make there, but you said that's the point, that's the problem with trying to worship an ancient text, and I think what
Well,
you
I
meant to
mean,
say was
that's all they
worship,
know about their deity is what's in the text.
right? But they don't technically. I mean, we don't.
Not technically,
Well,
no.
actually, no, I wouldn't even say not technically. They don't. We don't worship the Bible itself. We worship the God that the Bible is trying to interpret for us, trying to communicate for us. Um, so anyway, uh, yeah. So we kind of got into this rabbit hole when we were talking about right to deny service and discriminate and so forth. I, by my own libertarianism and private property beliefs believe that nobody really has a right to somebody else's properly and legally owned and acquired property, uh, except for themselves, except for the owner. Nobody has a right to it except for the
I
owner. In the
I
case,
would argue
what?
that with regards to socialism, a worker's labor isn't exactly property. So
Well, if you're talking about like say public ownership, well then that's where it kind of gets into a different into a little bit of a different story. Like for example, the town hall here in my city, Wichita, is not my town hall uh or Jeff Longwell's town hall or anyone like that. It is our town hall. So we all get a say as to what is to be done. What are the rules for if you're to step foot on the town hall, or even say that nobody is allowed to step foot on the town hall, etc. But I mean, but that's not this what we have right now. We do not have the society of where that everything is like publicly owned via socialism or democratic socialism or whatever other brand of socialism or communism you want to propose. But what we do have is private property, a private sector, and capitalism.
there would certainly have to be redistribution of land if and wealth for socialism to occur.
Right.
But I think that it would be fair to offer some sort of compensation for the land, at least, that is taken.
So if you were so okay, you're not a full-on socialist yet anyways, but for if you were to become a socialist, you would say that your way of attaining socialism is for all the businesses to be bought and then sold, well, given to the people or something like that.
Yeah, it would happen through the democratic process as well.
Okay.
I'm not like a revolutionary like a lot of the socialists that I talk to. I don't think a revolution is feasible at all. So
So it sounds like that you would be more of a gradualist than anything else.
yeah,
I can, yeah, I can have more respect for gradualists at least than extremists. The extremists that say that they want it right fucking now at this second. We should plot out a revolution to like speed up the process and so on and so forth.
well, and the problem is that it's it's never going to happen where like a group of workers revolts and overthrows the United States government with their tanks and their and their nukes and all that. I
Right.
don't think anything like that could ever happen, which is also one of the things that I think is funny about some people who hold like extreme positions in favor of gun rights.
Right. I
But
mean, I
that's
could
beside the
almost,
point.
yeah. Although I would almost theorize that if somebody really did want to obtain socialism or anarcho-capitalism, that they could at least overturn the government within a small area of land. Like they don't have to like uh that would be much easier than trying to overthrow the entire fucking national government, like all the way up to the federal level and seize the entirety of continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. But say if some some populace out in the middle of nowhere in say Wyoming, for example, they could probably like overthrow the government and then say, "Hey, this is our area now, bitch." Well, actually, now that I think about it, they would probably send in the National Guard if type of a situation like that happened.
Yeah,
The
like
Wyoming
when those
government.
guys up in what was it, Oregon or Washington, couple several years ago, I guess, where they were sticking up the federal land because one of them was in trouble for lighting it on fire or something.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I haven't heard of that story right there. Um, but talking about gradualists versus extremists, and applying that to kind of anarcho-capitalists and socialists. Adam Kokesh is an anarcho-capitalist, and he's more of the extremist variant, where he wants to like run for president. By the way, he's not very well liked in ANCAP circles, just to let you know, with the ANCAPs I've talked to. But Adam Kokesh, an ANCAP that is like running for president, he supposedly says, this is what I generally hear anyways, and nobody has disputed with it, that as soon as he gets into the presidency, that he would sign an executive order abolishing the entirety of the government. Yeah, that like
I don't
that's
know. I don't think that's how the Constitution works.
yeah, I don't think it's at all possible. I mean, not only okay, even if the guy were to be successful, it would be like too much of an expedited process. There's like still millions upon millions of people reliant on welfare and would even throw a fit and like lead a riot or whatever, lead riots throughout the street to try and throughout the streets to obtain their resources if they cannot get it through the government teat. But even then, there are
Yeah,
like other yeah.
I've talked to anarcho communists, and the ones that aren't like extreme, like immediate revolution now, they tend to think, you just slowly start to, transfer ownership directly to people over time, and more towards like uh, stateless, classless system, like full on communism or whatever. But
Right.
it's not supposed to be something that happens immediately.
So when it comes to ANCOMs, there are the tanky ANCOMs and then the gradualist ANCOMs.
I mean, I think tanky more refers to like Marxist Leninists than
And
anything. But I mean, I get what you mean
very
by
little
like
difference.
very revolutionary. Um,
Yeah, but well, what I'm meaning by tanky is just somebody that be dressing themselves up all black clad and then arming themselves with Molotov cocktails and clubs and whatnot and say trying to overthrow Starbucks and McDonald's. Let's
yeah,
trash the place.
the
And
Antifa super soldiers.
yes, exactly. Um, well, there was a point that I was trying to make earlier. Damn it. This is like the live stream where I've most lost my train of thought. Um, damn it. Oh yeah. Regarding to Adam Kokesh, back to him. Even if he was to like try to attempt to put forth an executive action like that, he's going to like get a whole lot of challenge from other politicians. So his thing is going to be completely, absolutely unfeasible. Whereas the gradualists and caps, I have a ton more respect for because they want to like gradually say, uh, or at least some of them, anyways, vote the government or reform the government to become smaller and smaller to the point that people aren't so reliant on it, and then completely abolish it so that people are more used to smaller government, if not no government.
Because they have like a more reasonable, realistic, structural idea for how they're gonna achieve their policy goals. So
Yeah, they have a more logical approach to it, anyways.
yeah, it's not just we're gonna get a bunch of guns and then we're gonna overthrow the government, and that's
Hey, didn't you hear they have a McNukes? That's their supply. That's their supplier of
oh
weaponry.
yeah, they're like supplying the McNukes underground in their ANCAP bunkers in Missouri or whatever.
About a dozen M1A1 Abrams tanks and so so on and so forth. No, this is just us roasting you. Is all. Come on, ANCAP subscribers, you know I love you. But anyway, um, uh,
I have an anarcho-capitalism meme, and it says, when a giant capitalist hires a private army to occupy the entire free nation and installs an authoritarian despot with no individual rights." And that was one of my favorites. I'm gonna have to send that one at some point.
yeah, send it to me via Twitter DMs or something. Um, oh, yeah, I have lots of respect for anarcho-capitalists, and with my worldview, I find it to be the absolute moral ideal. Like, no, this is not me saying that it would be like a perfect utopia where nobody would die, nobody would starve or anything if we just get anarcho-capitalism. Even the anarcho-capitalists don't say that that is the utopia. What I mean by moral ideal is that nobody is applying absolutely any force for life to go on, like no, absolutely no taxes and whatnot. But I just cannot see of how that is technically feasible. And this is
Yeah,
something
I
I,
mean, if we lived in like a fantasy land where like everyone worked together, an anarchist ideology of any kind would be like the
yeah,
ideal. But
right. Um, and this is another thing that I would have to like talk to my fellow ANCAP friends about. This is I think that if you were to get Ancapistan, that eventually it would boil back down to having de facto states. Like the private military is going to claim a piece of land, and if you want proper protection from the private military, you'll have to like move to that.
private courts and private everything, private hospitals, and the only difference between a private military and a public one is
But yeah.
uh,
So anyway, what I was.
it's de facto a state. Essentially, they just want a state where
Mhm.
everything is private.
Um. But yeah, you'll have like the private military claiming a piece of land and saying if you want us to properly protect you, you'll have to like live on our land and pay us a fee, and then it just boils down to a de facto state. I mean, I guess one can theorize that they don't have to move to said land, but at the same time, say like the private military was warring with another private military because hey, you slept with my wife or something like that, and then the other one is all like, no, you're slandering me, I did not sleep with your wife, and so on and so forth. And so
Well,
that
yeah, when you have the private Gestapo going around and locking people up, then there's some
yeah.
issues.
So you'll have the private militaries drawing battle lines with each other and claiming land for their own and saying if any of my customers want me to properly protect them from the other private military, so on and so forth, move to my land.
And
And
more
then it just
importantly, like the person with
and
the
then
most money that can
yeah.
buy the biggest private army is the one that
and
wins every time.
and then at that point we're just back to square one of where you have these de facto nation states. um so what, what I was trying to say about right to deny service. Actually, we're so far off of that tangent right there.
Yeah, this train has been thoroughly derailed. It's rolled down the mountain at this point, and
Well, I'm so far enjoying this conversation. By the way,
yeah, I've enjoyed it quite a bit too. So
um, so a couple things that I kind of want to bring up here within the next 12 minutes is that you seemingly I don't know if you were like being sarcastic or not, but you seemingly called me a racist like on Sunday or Saturday or whatever it was, whenever it was, to S Man.
wait, did I call you a racist?
You did not explicitly say Dark Khan is racist. He was talking about of how I remind him of Barry Goldwater somehow. I don't know enough
Oh,
about him, but then you were all like, they're both racists, and then I was all
that
like, wait, are
that
you
was some meme. So
really? What?
I wasn't like legitimately saying that you were racist.
Okay.
I just thought that it was funny that he went to Goldwater, who was pretty racist. I think
Well,
when he thought of you, so I just made that joke. But I don't actually think you're racist.
all right. I mean,
But
otherwise
I
that
know
would
you
probably
might be
be
a big racist. But
yeah, that you so far no. I mean, the most the most racist that it gets with me is probably just in my sense of humor. But aside from that, Don't believe a white ethno state. Don't believe that any given race is inherently superior or inferior to another. Um, oh, and also, I would say, I would also say my taste in girls, because by definition, by the third definition of racism, because there's three different definitions of it according to Merriam-Webster, by the third definition of racism, I am racist in having a racial preference as what kind of girl I want. But that's like petty and doesn't
Might as
necessarily
well
make me a
be
bigot.
George Wallace then, I guess.
What?
I was just memeing. I said you might as well be George Wallace then.
I don't know enough about George. Oh wait, no, George Wallace. I think talking. I think we're
He
thinking
ran
of.
for president against Kennedy. So
Okay. For
he
some
was the
reason,
governor of Alabama.
I was thinking of the one Fox News host that looked like that kind of looks eerily similar to Mitch McConnell. Um, I think his last name is Wallace. Chris Wallace. I think that's his name. But anyway, yeah. Um,
Maybe.
but I say that if a person has a racial preference in who they want their spouse to be, that it is by the third definition of racism, racist, but it's not bigoted or hateful or anything like
I
that,
mean, it
or
depends on
anything worth
where
bitching about.
it depends on where it comes from. Like, if if you're like, oh, I'd never date a black person because you think that they're more likely to commit a crime against you or something, then that's probably racist. But if you're
Okay,
just like, oh, I'm not attracted to that complexion, then I don't know if I could say that's racist. At all,
no,
so.
you raise a legitimate point right there. If somebody is to make a rather prejudiced assumption based off of a negative stereotype of why that they don't want to marry somebody of a given race, well then that would be, I would say, bigoted. But no, what I mean by racial preference is what your physical attraction is what I'm meaning.
Yeah, I don't think that like I think
Well,
that people are pretty much attracted to what they're attracted to. I don't think there's much that one can do to change that. So
yeah, I mean, like, do you like darker pigmentation, lighter pigmentation? Do you like slanted eyes, or do you like a more ovalish white person's eyes, and so on and so forth? And Red Feather asks in the chat, "You only like Asians?" No, I did not say that at all in my whole entire monologue there, Red Feather. But no, it's actually black women. Uh, Sexual preferences are not racist. Yeah, they're not racist in that they're not bigoted, Red Feather. I mean, I'm not trying, but they are sexist. Okay. Oh, I think I know what she's getting at. She's LGBT thing. I mean, if like a girl, for example, was a lesbian and only will ever date women and not date men, it's not bigoted or hateful or anything like that. I mean, if a person wants to go off on a limb, then it is by definition sexist, but it's not hateful or bigoted or anything worth making a full crusade about, you know?
yeah, I think like the whole thing with like any sort of sexual preference, just let people like who they want to like as long as the relationship is consensual, so, and
Mm,
children can't consent. So
right. Or at least they have no perception in their mind to grasp the the conception of uh consenting. Uh Boomer also says sexual preferences aren't racist unless you're racist about it. Yeah, I'm gonna have this conversation with you on Monday, Boomer. We'll be talking about race issues a lot. I think I also want to like ask you about your, I guess, the black nose state, if I am able to put it so bluntly. Um,
it's going to be an entertaining conversation. I'll have to watch that.
yeah. Um, So I guess the last thing, actually, no, I think we've kind of went off on the whole racism issue long enough. Well, actually, no, there was one last comment I wanted to make about Barry Goldwater. I mean, the examples that S-Man, no. Probably best that we just get onto the whole gun conversation because we got about 5 minutes left that you'll be
Yeah.
able to stay on. So, gun rights. What is your full position on gun rights, if I may ask?
So like in an idyllic world, I would say that nobody would have guns, except for like the military. That includes like the
And
cops wouldn't
police?
have guns. But I
Oh,
don't think I don't
well,
think that
okay.
idyllic world exists. So right now, I'd just advocate for normal, like sensible measures, like expanding background checks and longer waiting periods and all that.
Mm-hmm. Um, so ideally, you would like guns to not exist at all except for military. And you wouldn't even want them for police, but realistically, you just want expanded background checks and what else? Sorry.
Like expanded background checks and mental health checks and waiting periods and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are good solutions for now. I wouldn't be opposed to like a buyback, because I think if
Mm.
people want to voluntarily turn in their guns, that should be legally able to be done.
I
Especially if
mean,
you're trying to like limit the amount of guns, because in America I think we have more guns than we do people, and if you're the government and you want to kind of quell that a little bit, you can say if you want to give your guns up, then you can give it to us and we'll just destroy them and repurpose whatever the remains are, I guess.
okay, I'm trying to like Google up here. Was the Australian gun buyback consensual? Okay, but you go talking about if a person voluntarily wants to sell their gun to the government. Well, I don't think in all reality I have any problem with that legally or morally. I mean, I don't see as to why a person would do that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if anything, sell your gun to like your neighbor or someone else, or I mean, it doesn't make sense to me why you would sell it to the government, but if you want to, I guess. But was the Australian gun buyback consensual? As I'm trying to look it up. I mean, do you know that?
I don't remember if it was. I think that to some extent there were people who had to give up their guns, but I'm not sure if like I don't think everyone had to give up their guns or very many.
Hmm. Uh, I'm not getting a whole lot about Australia's. Okay, that's not it. Reflections on the golden age of guns, gun facts, James Jacobs anti-gun control argument, Japanese gun control. I'm searching up about Australia. Google,
Japanese gun
you just
control is actually very interesting because Japan has some of the most restrictive gun control in the world, and almost nobody has a gun in Japan.
I mean, it's kind of
And
easy when
they
you're
had like
that's kind
I
of easy when you're waterlocked.
yeah, uh, in 1 year they had like 11 deaths, I think, from guns. So their programs have certainly been successful. I'm not sure if they could be as successful in the United States when there's so many guns already in circulation, but the goal would be to quell that to some extent.
Okay, yeah, I'm not really searching up much. I would have to look further into these articles that I'm searching up talking about the Australian gun buyback, but yeah. Um I mean statistically, obviously philosophically, I'm completely against gun control, and more precisely I am completely against uh gun grabbing, like absolute gun bans. But statistically speaking, an island can easily be effective in posing gun control and get like lower crime, or at least gun lower gun related crime, because nobody will easily enough be able to smuggle in guns. But for the case here in America, anyways, you'll have, for example, the drug cartels or anyone else like south of the border being able to easily smuggle guns up to the United States, or even in the case of Canada. I don't think, as far as my knowledge goes, it wouldn't be as much of a problem with Canada, but even somebody from Canada could smuggle down a gun if, say, in the rhetorical situation, the U.S. completely banned guns to the point that even Canada is more pro-gun rights than America.
Yeah.
Which is likely
well,
not
and
happening.
to some extent, Canada's gun control seems to have been rather effective. There's a very high correlation between gun ownership rates and gun deaths among, developed countries. I think the only country that has more mass shootings currently than the United States, and I forget what definition this was based off of mass shooting, but it was Yemen, which is currently in civil war. So
yeah, I think mass shooting, school shootings and whatnot is a bit of an ambiguous term because people have different ways of measuring what is a mass shooting. Like it could be 4 people, it could be 10 people, it could be 20 people, it could be just 2 people classify as a mass shooting. And so that kind of inflates the numbers for a given country. But that's a little bit besides the point. Okay, for your proposed legislation, you mentioned mental health background checks, other extended background checks, longer waiting periods. What else did you say that you want? Remind me again.
Gun buyback, voluntarily.
Okay. I mean, as far as mental health checks go, I don't think that should be imposed to the point that if you have PTSD or ADHD, you thus should not be.
I don't know about ADHD, but if you have PTSD, it's probably not a good idea that you have a firearm.
I mean, it is kind of, I don't know. I mean, what I've researched is that people with mental illness are more likely to die in a shooting than to actually be the perpetrator of a shooting. I'd have to actually go back and look at that, but
I would also have to look into those numbers more. I'm not aware of those.
But
I do hate to cut you off though. It's past 10. I should really be getting going. It's late at my time, so.
All right, you can go ahead and leave, but I'm probably going to stick around with the chat for a few minutes more. But anyway, so thank you, Secular Hawk, for joining. It has been a wonderful, I will use the word wonderful conversation, and I'm glad that we could get some things smoothed out.
Yeah, I'll see you around at some point.
Yep. Take care.
Yep.
Secular Hawk is a cuck. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we could get some of the animosity out of the way. I mean, I thought that this live stream was going to be a whole lot more passionate than it actually ended up being. I mean, it was a decent conversation. I mean, it did not get as debatey and sparring as I thought it would, but it was a good chat. So some things that are said in the chat. Boomer says way further up in the chat, and comms are assholes. Okay. I mean, that's like me saying that ANCAPs are assholes. I do not know if I would be doing that, Boomer. ANCAPism eerily reminds me of feudalism. I think ANCAPs want to have some words with you, Boomer. But no, I'm just busting your balls mostly. Red Feather asked a question somewhere in here asking if Secular Hawk trusted the government, but I'm sorry that I could not transmit that question to Secular Hawk, Red, but we were kind of on a bit of a schedule for our conversation there. And it did not help that I kept on losing my train of thought throughout this entire conversation. That kind of slowed down the processes of this stream right here. Um, uh, okay, so Red Feather, she was saying these two comments like when we were still in the middle of talking about religion. Yep, we aren't supposed to eat shellfish or cloven-hooved animals either. Guess most are fucked. Well, that's fucked too, with code enforcement and easements in eminent domain. Oh, wait. Actually, I think that second comment right there was more regards to our economics conversation between me and Hawk. Taking over government by military force would not be easy. Yeah. I think it's Red Feather says this, and I think she was saying this like when I was talking about the rhetorical situation of how ANCAPism would then just boil down to de facto nation statism. I think it's more that they don't want the big corporations like Home Depot, for example, moving into town and putting everyone out of business. What? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Sorry. Red Feather says, I don't know who Barry Goldwater is. That's the person who ran against Lyndon Baines Johnson in the 1960s. I think it was 64, actually, who lost in a landslide to that Democrat. The stream starts, Boomer says, the stream starts right after my Black History class, so I might be radicalized. Bring it on, Boomer. I'll put some extra layers of skin on myself to have more skin in the game. Hawk is a gun grabber, says Boomer. You know, that was kind of what I was confused there too. And actually, I wish I kind of clarified that with Hawk. Wish I clarified that with him. Because at one point I thought he did say that he is for outright banning guns, but nah, I don't know. And those words there that talking with him, I guess he kind of changed his mind slightly on that. When I last heard like you and other people debating him on live stream, that was the live stream with Gemini, actually. You, S-Man, and Zoe, when we were still on good terms with her, we're all like talking to Hawk, and I think even Cult of Ham might have been participating debating against Secular Hawk as well a little bit. Like I thought I heard Secular Hawk during that one point in that live stream say that he would like to ban all guns, but I could be wrong in that. Secular Hawk, do you trust the government? Again, I wish I would have actually got to that question. Boomer says there's no sensible gun control. I can overall agree with that. Holy shit, I'm Canadian. Don't be us. Don't do it, bros, says Slavey McSlaverson. Or I don't know if that's pronounced Slavey McSlaverson or Slavy McSlaverson. But yeah, this guy is like from Two Plebs Talk News a YouTube channel, his subscriber base. I don't know if he subscribed to me or not, but hey, hello, Slavy. Mental health checks would be discriminatory towards me, you cuck boy, says Boomer. All right, so I guess that's one more reason for me to be against mental health checks is just to just not to piss you off, at least, Boomer. Slavy McSlaverson says, weld all your guns together into a big chair. It'll be so deep and woke. Okay? Ninjas don't need guns anyway. Applying that to Japan, I guess. I don't know where some of these comments are like applying to, because Boomer says that sounds horrifying, and Red Feather says that's why they hang themselves. According to Marxism, gun control is bad. Yeah, I think that's what I actually heard about Karl Marx himself, is that he was like for gun ownership. Actually, no, it was like one of my ANCAP buddies when I was in a live stream with them. They said it themselves that Karl Marx is all for gun ownership. So, hey, if an ANCAP is saying it, then that must mean it's true. Hawk says in the chat, I'm not a full-on disciple of Marx himself, Taylor. Infidel, says Boomer. Red Feather says, Hawk, why won't you answer my question? Sorry, Red, we could not get it to that question again. Slavi also says guns get smuggled into Canada. We have nothing you want. Murder rate in Toronto was higher than New York per capita last year. Okay. A mass shooting is anything activists want it to be, says Boomer. Yes, I guess that's what it ultimately boils down to, Boomer. Hello, Brandon. How are you doing? Okay. A little further up here, trying to find my place again. I just got done working out, says Brandon. Oh, well, get swole then, my brother. So, okay. So London and Toronto had higher crime rates than New York City. Interesting, says Red. Okay. And Slavi says shootings every other weekend in the hood. He also says further down, murder rate, not sure about crime rate overall. And Boomer says, Hawk, do not discriminate against depressed people. Slavi says he sounds nice. Ignore him. Who sounds nice? Ignore him. Are you talking about Hawk? I mean, Hawk was at least decent in this call, but he isn't as decent when it comes to talking in chats with them, like over Twitter and whatnot. Darkon, he never answered if he trusted the government. Again, I'm sorry about that, Red. Bye, bitch, says Boomer. And comes and kiss my black ass. Actually, let me try to put on my Boomer impersonation. And comms can kiss my black ass or whatever. I'm a bit of an asshole sometimes, says Slavi. Yeah, a lot of the people in the Two Plebs fan base can be assholes at times, as I've noticed in the Discord servers and whatnot. Nightshift says, I know I'm just asking for it, but fuck ANCOMs and narco-communism is fake anarchy and capism is true anarchy. Ooh, blood spilt. Hey, I'm here, says Canadian Supernova. Hello, Supernova. Supernova. It's okay. I was just gonna ask him if you would want to control the guns. If the answer was yes, no problem, Red. Gun control is evil, says Boomer. I concur. Zach, are you joining the Lonely Bastard stream tomorrow night? Actually, Brandon, I do not know that for absolute certain because I also have like my Bible study group that I will be joining tomorrow evening as well. Maybe I'll do it late at night if you'll still be live, like after 9 p.m. Boomer says he said it many times. What, are you talking about, like banning all guns? Sorry, everybody, if I'm like getting to your chat comments kind of late here. I'm working my way down in the chat. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to like screen share the chat as I'm looking at it. He said it many times. Boomer, do you believe Jussie Smollett? Jussie Smollett. Do not know who that is. Boomer says, I'm not sure if I believe Smollett. I want to believe him, but his story has too many holes. Oh, okay. Apparently Slavey McSlaverson. He says Slavey as in slave. LOL. Wow. Edgy name there, guy. I'm an ostrich, bitches. Okay. Supernova says ANCAPs are actually supporting something that is actually anarchist, other than ANCOMs, which is just an oxymoron. Red says agreed, Boomer, to the Smollett comment, I guess. Nightshift sings guns never bothered me anyway. I don't know what song he's trying to sing that to. Supernova says, because I don't know what we're talking about. Okay. Boomer also says, Hawk's position on revolutionary politics is kind of a straw man. Oh, revolutionary politics? Are you talking about like overthrowing the government and stuff like that? I mean, again, we'll get like to a whole lot of these issues in our own one-on-one live stream. Taylor, Boomer. All right. Supernova says Edge, Edge E, and Brandon says that the Lonely Bastards Valentine's Day stream starts at 10 p.m. So that'll be like plenty of time for me to get involved with that. So cool. Yeah, I'll join there for at least a little bit, Brandon, but I probably won't stay very long because I got work the next day. Slavey McSlaverson, as you can see here on the screen, ANCOMs make me lose faith in humanity. And Boomer says good, which is kind of funny. What the fuck? Stalin was kind of hot. I guess it was the caterpillar mustache, wasn't it, Boomer? He also says further up, and caps make me laugh. Yeah, I think ANCAPs make a whole lot of people laugh, but they don't really make me laugh because I find their points more interesting and whatnot. Supernova says, edgy like Shadow the Hedgehog. All right. So, anyway, I think that's where I'm going to like end this stream right here. It was the butterfly chrysalis mustache, says Supernova. And Brandon says he still sucked ass. I concur there, Brandon. But anyway, I think that's where I'm going to end this. I'm done getting caught up in the chat and hanging out with y'all. I got to get myself some dinner and wrap up my night because I got work tomorrow morning. And so thank you all for participating in the chat. This has been a very interesting and fun conversation with Hawk. A lot funner. Again, a lot funner than I originally thought it was going to be. But I guess that's just my debate or interview anxiety kind of hitting me beforehand. But I'm glad that that was resolved. Anyway, see y'all later. Stay cool. God bless. Stay safe. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.